Okay, at this point we have done all the machine work on a lathe to the tubes and got those turned down so they fit in the receivers of the hog head. And we also at that time turned the ends to accept our C's here, and we're going to wait on that. But a little tip on getting the tubes in, we have machined these little pockets in the end of the tubes, okay, so that our seals can be pressed in there. And one thing that's sort of important to notice when you're doing this is you have this shoulder right here inside the receiver, and you don't necessarily need to drive the tube all the way in till it hits that shoulder. Many stock Dana 44s that I've seen, this dimension, this gap right here tends to vary, and you can see I'm much closer on this side. And the critical thing that you're trying to achieve is you need to measure from this surface right here, the edge of the saddle, to the end of the tube. Tube length is sort of, you know, you got plus or minus a quarter inch that you're messing with. You know, the real critical thing is that you get the seal in the right spot, and you've got a ½ inch either way to get that, you know, in a smooth spot on the shaft. But more importantly, you got to have the tube the right dimension so that the end of it is registered off of this face or off the center line of the differential. That's tough to do because we don't really have a differential in here, and once you install one, there's no way to measure it. So what we do is we take a tape and we run it down through here, and we measure on the one we're trying to copy. This is a low pinion GM. Measure from that face out to the end of the tube, both sides. And then you drive the tube in until you hit that measurement. And that may or may not be with this hitting the shoulder. So as you can see, I've stopped this one a ½ inch short, and it matches the dimension. This one had to go in a little bit deeper, and it also matches. So what you're shooting for when it's all said and done is you take your stock Chevy shaft, and you know, your axle's going to sit somewhere about right there when it's finally assembled. And you can see that where my seal sits is going to be where it is, and on the shaft, on the smooth part, and then your splines are fully into the differential. And no C-clips on these. These are floaters, so once you put them in with the knuckle and you attach all this stuff, they do float back and forth. So the tube is probably not as critical tube length as it would be on something where you've got C-clips or flanges out on the outside that you're bolting them in. So right about now you're probably wondering, how the hell did you get the tubes in there? Well, I machined these down to have an interference fit, and they should fit fairly tight. Obviously you don't want these loose in there, but you can see now that they're pressed in. Here's where the rosette welds go, and we're just going to pop those and fill this little hole up with weld. And what you're doing with that is you're not necessarily welding to the case here. What you're doing is you're welding a pin to this tube, and it comes up through that hole, and you do that in 6 places, and it pins the tube into this. So all you guys, you know, you get on the forums and you see all this, what the hell do we do when I'm welding cast iron? Is it nodular iron? Is it forged? What rod do I use? Do I use stainless? Do I got to preheat it? None of the above, because you're not welding to this. You're simply jamming the tubes in, and you're weld pinning them with rosette welds. And then, believe it or not, of all the techniques that works best, I have this wooden thing here, and it's an old crate, and I actually get it started in there, and I take the pumpkin and I actually throw it down at this wooden thing repeatedly. Shakes the whole garage, and I drive this drive it into this receiver. You can do it with the press, but I think the shock of this thing getting hit drives it in much better than trying to slowly push it in with the press, because you start to deform the case. If you do use a press, you need to machine a piece of bar stock to sit in here so that as you're pressing it in, you're not going to collapse this case. You don't want to bend it. You can apply some heat if it's really tight, but actually just standing it up on end and driving the tube in there till you get this dimension works great. And of all the techniques I've tried, that caveman approach seems to work the best. Once you get the short side in, flip it over, get this started, and then at that point it gets real heavy. And you might need 2 guys to sit here and pick it up and just bounce it, throw it onto the concrete as hard as you can, and make sure you use a piece of wood so you don't scar up the end of the tube. Once you get it where you're at, keep checking, and you want to stop it so that you match your dimension, so that your axle shafts will fit and your seal's in the correct place. If you go too far, I don't know what to tell you. You can try to push it back out somehow, but to be honest with you, once you do this, it's done. I don't think you can pull this out and retube it again. The only other thing that I want to do before I weld these is I have a friend with a great big World War II lathe. It's a monster, and it's actually big enough for me to clamp this in, okay, and slowly spin it. And I'll put a dial indicator on here, and I'll measure the run out. And what I can do is smack it with a mallet and sort of tune it and get it straight so it's running true. When I say straight, you could probably run this right now, no problem at all. I've seen a lot of four-wheel drives that have smiley face housings. They work. It's not pretty, it's probably not right. Eventually you're going to wear out some, bearings and stuff. But I think if you just press these in, you're good to go.